Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast, where we celebrate filmmaking, storytelling and cinema across the island of Ireland. So this episode was recorded live at the Capital Irish Film Festival, presented annually by Solas Nua in Washington, D.C. And for filmmakers listening, do note that the deadline to submit your film for next year's festival is coming up soon on Film Freeway. So later in the episode, I'll be catching up with academic Dr Chanté Mouton-Kinyon, a professor of English at the University of Notre, and Chanté was part of a lively discussion panel following the screening of Daniel O'Connell, The Emancipator. But first, we catch up with Andrew Dolan. He's an artist, a producer and the executive director of Solas Nua. Based in Washington, D.C., Solas Nua is a non-profit arts organisation dedicated to Irish arts. So founded in 2005, they bring contemporary Irish artistic work to audiences across the United States. So I was wondering if you could start by introducing yourself and Solas Nua and the work that you do.
So hi, I'm Andrew Dolan, Executive Director at Solas Nua. Solas Nua is a nonprofit here in Washington, D.C. Our focus is contemporary Irish arts. So theater, music, literature, visual art, and film. And
can you tell me about your work with the festival?
Yeah, this festival has been going on for 20 years. And so as executive director, I kind of oversee all of the whatever's happening, I guess.
And I was wondering if you could tell me about how the festival has grown year to year.
Yeah, so it started, our founder, Linda Murray, was into everything that is contemporary and the voice of Ireland now. This is back in 2005. And at that point, she started with theater, but immediately began promoting authors and film and showing film. And at first it was just in a found space, and then it has slowly grown. And then we've been at AFI, the American Film Institute, here for about 8 years.
If you could tell me the work you do in film specifically, and then, the crossover for theater and literature as well.
Sure. So our main component with film is the Capital Irish Film Festival, which is one of the largest programs of Irish film in North America. And then throughout the year, we have a program called Capital Irish Film Festival at Home, in which we have streaming films available for folks to watch at home. And then we sometimes do live showings. Brian McGuire, the visual artist, was in town last summer. So when he was here, we presented the documentary on his work. Whenever we have an Irish filmmaker nearby, we want to show their work. And then we're also doing theater productions throughout the year, playwrights reading their new work, and literature readings. So coming up, we have Colm Tobin coming into town, and we're going to do a big event with him.
Amazing. And tell me what the work that you're doing now for St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, so at Solas Nua, because we believe in contemporary Irish art and the version of Ireland that exists today, our tradition is to give away free literature from authors, poets, writers that are coming out. So this year we're giving away 300 books from Banshee Press.
And tell me, who is your audience? Who are the people that you engage with?
Well, Washington, D.C. has a strong Irish community, strong Irish American community. Some folks directly from Ireland who live here now, and then some first generation, second generation Irish Americans, and then it goes even further back. And then there's just people who love contemporary work, who just like that Ireland is producing some of the best artists right now and have been for decades and decades and decades, so there are folks who just love great work.
Amazing. What's your favorite events and stuff to do? Do you get to enjoy them, or is it more like an intense labor of administration?
No, I mean, this is the fact that on a Thursday night to show Saipan, which is this fantastic film, but is a very Americans don't necessarily know what happened in the World Cup in Ireland 25 years ago, but yet we have 400 people where the line goes out the theater, throughout the entire theater, and then out the door to the street. So that's just an amazing thing to see every year.
And what are some of the moments maybe that you're the most proud of in terms of, promoting cultural events or, over the years that you've worked there?
Well, that we're able to build long-term relationships with artists. And so a film that we show in 2018, then in 2024, we're bringing that filmmaker here so that way the audiences that were here 5 years ago are still getting to be in conversation with the work. And so that's a lot of what we do. Like our first artist that we worked with was Enda Walsh back in 2005. And so we've continued to produce his work. And so on our 20th anniversary, we invited Enda Walsh and said, like, hey, what do you want to do? And he's like, let's just do some of my plays and we'll have a conversation. And so it's a 20-year relationship.
And do you dabble in the arts yourself? Do you have a kind of preferred area or maybe that you enjoy working on?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm a trained theater director, but at the same time, being able to produce, 30 events a year that bring in thousands of people, like that's brings me so much joy. My favorite place to be is with my arms crossed in the back of the room, watching hundreds of people, captured on the screen right now. So yeah.
And in terms of, again, I think bridging the two communities, Ireland and America has had such a kind of strong relationship over the years. Do you see that as, being particularly important now?
I think that as Americans continue to look for meaning, spirituality, value, connection, making sure that there are access points for that. And if that connection point is Irish history or contemporary Ireland or the Irish language, making sure that there are places in communities where they can access them. And so that's what's important to us here.
And I suppose that speaks to the bigger point as well about human connection in terms of, these stories. And we're, like, most of us will be in our arts and we, see our ecosystem, from inside. As someone who's sort of observed all forms of art, like from that slightly outsider perspective in terms of, you're seeing it as it's coming out, but have you noticed like a shift in trends or voices? Like what have you seen change in that time? Because it's quite a considerable, like Ireland today is not the Ireland of even 5 years ago.
That's true. The amazing thing about Ireland and the work that the artists do is that it is always great, and it is honed storytelling and nuanced ways of understanding that aren't like didactic or like single message. And that is something that I've experienced since I started working with Irish artists 20 years ago.
Thank you so much for chatting with us. It's a real honor to be here.
Yeah, thank you for this.
Now I'm delighted to welcome Dr Chanté Mouton-Kinyon. This was recorded on location just after the screening of Daniel O'Connell, The Emancipator, so please forgive the sound. Chanté is a professor of English at the University of Notre and holds a PhD in English from the University of Galway. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, so you're a prominent academic. I was wondering if you could talk about your field of study, and then we'll link it into a very exciting film that screened today and was sold out and had people around the block dying to get in first.
Thank you. Well, that had more to do with Ruan than with myself, but thank you very much. So I do, I guess, the long 20th century in terms of thinking about literature and culture and history of Irish Americans, or not Irish Americans, of African Americans and Irish people. And I do comparative work in terms of how they were influenced by each other or influenced each other.
Yeah, there was a clip that went viral of a Cork politician talking in the Dáil.
Really?
And it went viral recently on TikTok because of the similarities to the Jamaican accent.
Ah, yes. I mean, so I guess from the criminal era, there would have been quite a few Irish people that were sent away. We called them Cromwellian slaves. We've had to start differentiating the language because, of course, the indentured servitude that the Irish experienced was quite different than the slavery that blacks experienced during the transatlantic slave trade. But there was a period of time within the Caribbean where these two group of people would have lived together, worked together, been bonded at the same time. The difference is that the Irish people eventually did get out of their circumstances and out of a situation. Of course, as we know, people of African descent in the Caribbean did not. And because of that, when the Irish were freed after that term, a lot of them became slave owners. And so, especially in places like Jamaica or the St. Kitts Island, St. Kitts, Montserrat is famous for it. A lot of the black people there have a speech or a dialect that's quite similar to what we would hear in Ireland, in parts of Ireland.
Well, that's interesting. So I thought it was us being influenced by that because Cork was a port, but it was sort of like a more of a mutual thing.
I mean, Cork was important, so you would have some people of African descent, some going to Ireland. Equiano writes about being in Ireland, but I think that accent, that speech, is mostly coming from Irish who had immigrated or were forced out of Ireland and lived in the Caribbean, and then their influence or their being stationed there in those places, in those islands, Jamaica, Montserrat, St. Kitts, Nevis, you would have the speech that influenced it because they were so much a part of the Ireland.
Yeah, and I think that's so disappointing. I think it's also like so disappointing as an Irish person to the brutality of the police force that are all Irish, and it's like, did you not know the crap that we had to climb out of?
It is,
yeah.
I mean, but historically, this is what's happened with the Irish, which is really unfortunate. And we were talking about, in some ways, with the Daniel O'Connell film, because at the time, he was an abolitionist. And so a lot of the Irish not a lot, but some Irish people who had immigrated to the United States supported slavery and started really speaking out in support of slavery. And Daniel O'Connell was like, who are you? If we're Irish people, like, we are persecuted, how can you participate in a system that persecutes other people? Unfortunately, I think especially in the Americas, not just the United States, but in the Caribbean, in the New World, you would see people of Irish descent really kind of ascending into that, what Daniel O'Connell called the aristocracy of color, and accepting their position as white and taking advantage of that. So it's been famously called how the Irish became white, but it's you can see how people of Irish descent really accepted systematic oppression when they weren't in Ireland.
Yeah, and we are literally from a place of systemic oppression.
Yes.
What's very interesting is you can kind of see this in culture since we got our independence, that we voted in a second kind of oppression after we got our first oppression over and done with. So there's something in the psychology there of you can't fight the system, you just have to create a new horrible system.
Are you thinking
Catholicism?
In terms of Catholicism?
Yeah. I was like, we just handed the keys of the castle over to an even bigger bunch of bastards.
It's so funny because, people of our generation have really distanced themselves from the church now. And we were just talking about Boccia. And it was interesting because in that film you have a representative of the church who's actually quite kind and loving and is supportive of the community. And it's unfortunate that the people that committed those atrocities, and I'm thinking of Tomb and some of these other instances. There's been film here on the Magdalene houses. The people that contributed those that did these awful things, committed those atrocities, they really blackened the entire religion for so many, and especially people of our generation.
But I suppose it's the systemic tendrils are still there and it's just, I think your field of study is so interesting because we're how we see music, how when Catholicism was about spirituality, how it protected us for a while, and how, it was the thing that helped us have our independence, but then it becomes something much more sinister and twisted when those tendrils of power kick in. In terms of, again, the the similarities, what would be like even more?
No, I would say, like, I actually think, or I see what's happening in Ireland now kind of a mimic of what happened with the Irish that immigrated in America in the 19th century, right? It's that it's not so much about benefiting from things, but it's like, I came here, I'm immigrating, and now I have this power or privilege, white privilege, you know, that I don't have to be treated like shit anymore.
Yeah.
And who wants to be treated like shit? You know, who wants to be on the bottom? And it's hard, I think, when, you know, you remember hunger, at least not in your current life, but at least in recent memory. You remember hunger, you remember that trouble, that pain of starvation, of isolation, of exile. And you're like, I actually don't have to do this anymore because I could just go get a job. And it's hard to like align yourself with people that are facing the same thing. It's hard to make the choice to give up privilege.
And it's something like I have noticed, and it isn't everyone, like, and I'd say there's a lot of generosity, and it isn't everyone in these communities, but the ones that I've noticed where it has taken hold is the slightly more disenfranchised. So
Always.
It's the working class.
Yeah.
And it does feel very pointed in how it is orchestrated. Like sometimes it feels like very cleverly like dug up, but it is that they're not on the bottom anymore, and they see like they probably enjoy taking that power to which is sort of horrible when you think, you know, like, do you not have empathy for that?
I think on an individual level, right, most people do have empathy. But I think on a broader scale, I think a person just is like, I need to eat, right? Yeah. I want this job. And if I'm going to get this job and that person can't get a job, it's really hard to say, don't take that job. Don't take that job because this person can't get a job. That's a privileged position to be. Again, like thinking about one of the documentaries I saw, thinking about the Adams documentary, and they were talking about the hunger strikers. That takes a lot of courage. I don't know if I have that kind of courage to say, I'm going to stand up for my principles. I'm going to do what's right because what I see happening around me is wrong. So I'm going to stop eating. I'm going to take my clothes off. I'm going to wear a blanket. Like that takes a lot of courage, and I don't think most people have the courage to do that. I think on the whole, everybody's just like, okay, well, I can participate. It's not affecting me personally. It takes a lot for a person to stand up to the wrongs. I think that's why people like O'Connell and like Douglas are so famous, because they are able to stand up to the wrongs. They were able to.
And in terms of, you know, the similarities of how, you know, and maybe the influence as well on our two cultures, are there any that you've kind of seen that are not us being horrible, even though we have been?
Yes,
Very
totally. Nice. I mean, in terms of the literature, right, and the art. For instance, you know, I write about how Black Americans have read a play or, you know, saw a piece of work and then said, that speaks to me, and then they use it to write or make their own conclusions about art and tell a story about Black America.
Yeah, I love this. Do you think it's like in modern society and in your studies that it's sort of a thought process that is encouraged in some way? Because it does, you know, if we're all pointing fingers this way, we never point them up.
Of course, right? I mean, if you have the working classes, if you have the poor fighting each other, then they're not thinking about who's created the situation. I mean, so classism, and it's unfortunate that race becomes the deciding factor, because it's really about class, right? It's really about the poor being pitted against each other, against the rich. And if the poor had historically bounded together, then the rich wouldn't have had this control. But of course, so classism is a huge factor in this, because you can put two poor people together when it's about food, and if they didn't have to fight over food or jobs or things, basic human rights, then they could join together and they could be allies. But if you make them fight each other, then of course it's going to be hard for them to be allies.
Of course. And so with a documentary like this, and like, have you watched it with many audiences? Do you come out and get to see it? Or
I've seen it with an audience twice. So mostly I've watched it on my computer a couple times, but I've seen it with an audience twice. Once in November when it was premiered, and then today.
Brilliant. And you studied in Galway?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I did my PhD at the National University of Ireland. It's something new now, I think.
National University of
Galway. Yeah, no, but I went to NUIG.
And is it easier to sort of study our history and culture being away from it? Like, do you find, like, like that there's biases of us on the ground or anything like that a little bit, or is it better to be at the source?
I mean, for me, I didn't know anything about Ireland. I just had this idea that, these two people are similar. These two histories are similar. I want to learn more. And being a Black American and growing up around Black Americans, I felt I had a good grasp of that aspect of the studies that I wanted to do. So I was like, I need to go to Ireland. For me, it was really beneficial. I look at it like it was like an ethnographic project. It was like, I'm around the people. I got to immerse myself in the people. It was a lovely experience. I mean, and the differences, of course, is that I was embraced, and how people don't see their own prejudices at the time. Actually, there was a debate even then about Eastern European immigrants, and someone actually said to me in the loving way, and they meant it so genuinely, "We'll take you." And so I was an immigrant. I was getting Irish funds. I actually got pregnant with my daughter at the time, so I was pregnant. I was everything that the foreigners were being presented as bad and negative. As a Black American, I was accepted in a way that unfortunately other people didn't experience, and I was shown love, lots that generosity that Daniel O'Connell talks about of the Irish heart.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. And are there elements to why you think maybe that was a little bit more? That, like, is it language?
I think it was because I'm a Black American. I think it's because I'm a Black American. And for Ireland, maybe not so much now, but this was, a decade ago. Still, to be an American is a good thing, especially cool. It's kind of cool, especially a Black American. My husband's Irish American, or my husband at the time is Irish American, and he would joke, we'd go into a pub and he'd go up to the bar and ask for a drink, and they wouldn't say anything. I'd go up to the bar and ask for a drink, and everybody turn around, where are you from, Les? So there was this novelty in not only me being American, but me being Black American, being different. It's changed so much, though. Galway, even Ireland, is very cosmopolitan in a way that it wasn't a decade ago. But
no, or a decade before that.
Even.
Like, it was, I suppose we didn't even really have immigration until the 90s.
Yes.
Really. Like, and anyway, like, we'd have the odd people trickling in, but it was just like, why would you go there?
Well, I mean, there was always some African presence, I think, historically. A lot of, I think, education-wise, there would people be from the continent that would go to Ireland for educational purposes or things like that, but it was more rare than now. Now I'm not a novelty anymore. I think even a decade ago I was a bit like, let's talk to this person because we haven't seen her in a while, or seen people like her. But now nobody gives me a second look.
And you will find everyone just enjoys Obama so much. They still, like, they named that really tiny little junction after him, and like everyone is like,
Also, and then I was talking about this just a couple years ago now, but that even I could go to I would go to the store and find hair products, like for myself. Yeah. I would see images of women that look like me in Ireland now that I wouldn't have saw 10 years ago.
Yeah. I think that's lovely. Yeah, and makeup and things like that.
Yeah, no, all that stuff is available, and it wasn't available when I was doing my PhD.
I think one of the things that's really, really exciting, because it's just nothing we would have ever seen, is the second generation and thick Dublin accents. Like, because it's so joyous, because it's just like you didn't, that was not a thing. You're just like, it's that real, like, that, like round syllables, and I think it's the thing where we've been exporting so much. And like, there is that thing of like holding on to the tangible bits of our own culture, but the thing that makes it the most interesting, the thing that besides the gene pool, it's like, again, we're a very small country with a few people, but is that kind of richness, and how this new music and new, like, I mean, foods, when your national dish is boiled cabbage.
I mean, but even that, I feel like I wonder if there was a heritage that's lost. So I write about that too, but there's this aspect of Ireland that's lost. It was lost to death, it was lost to famine, it was lost to immigration. Yeah. But I wonder, like, I bet you there was a history, and there is a history of food that isn't, the boiled down. That there's an aspect of history and culture that could be reimagined or refound that doesn't minimize the past in that way.
And was there anything kind of in your studies that surprised you, or that kind of like struck you as not that obvious response?
I mean, how much of a connection there is between Black America, with Blacks in the Americas and Ireland. It's huge. I mean, there were black boxers that fought in Ireland. I write about Montserrat, which is in the Caribbean, and it's the only country outside of Ireland that celebrates St. Patrick's Day as a national holiday. I mean, they're just one thing after another. You can find these moments of similarity and analogy. So I guess I really fight against that idea that the situations aren't analogous, because there's many moments of crossover.
Yeah, and I love the story as well, where Bernadette Devlin gave the key to New York.
To the
Black Panthers. I just think it's just one of the things where it's like, no, solidarity. It is like, it is an impressive enforcement situation that was so similar. And that.
I mean, for Bernadette and for Eamon McCann as well, who was there right before her, and also saw all the similarities. I think for them, it was shocking how much the Irish Americans did not support Black America at the time. Because for them, they're like, wait a minute, this is the same thing that's happening. But again, you're talking about privilege, you're talking about white privilege, you're talking about generations removed from that kind of horror that they would have been coming from. And so for them firsthand, it's like, well, we made it, how come they can't too, right? And that's a lot what you would hear from people that have been from formerly oppressed people. Well, I've done it, why can't they as well?
That's very interesting. But I do hope things get better. I hope one day you're like, actually, I've studied everything, and now everything is fine, and everyone are good friends, and everyone is equal.
There's many beautiful stories, but we just have to keep going forward, know. But I think humans like to find something different about each other, right? That's the story constantly, that we find things, we experience our differences, we think about our differences, but I don't know. People are good.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of art. Like, if you look at how it can kind of express things and connect to people, and see the humanity, and even if people might like logically be thinking a specific negative way, I think it does have this ability to open people up.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, like Daniel O'Connell, getting that story across. Do you dabble in documentary or anything like that? Would you like to? Would you be tempted to?
I mean, this was like, I said on stage, and I've said a few times before, this is the first time I ever experienced anything like this. So I was very self-conscious the entire time. We'll see what happens going forward. But yeah, I don't see myself making a documentary.
Be interesting. But thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you for chatting with me. Cheers.
Finally, I caught up with some cinema goers on the ground. Thanks so much for chatting. What's your name?
Jess.
Wonderful. And you just came from the shorts. I was just wondering, what did you enjoy about it? What ones did you like?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the variety of the programming. I thought they were all really unique. I really liked Boobs, the short documentary about, just allowing women to take up space and not feel ashamed of their bodies. I thought they were all really good and they were all really creative. So, yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Fabulous. And have you seen anything else at the festival?
Not yet, but I'm seeing Listen to the Land Speak, which I'm also really excited about. So, yeah, this is my first day at the festival, though.
Great. Are you enjoying it?
I am. I am a big fan of, Irish, arts, whether that's writing or music or theater. So yeah, no, I'm really happy that Silver Spring is able to do this and present stuff like this.
I've been coming to the festival for maybe 10 years now, I think.
Oh, wonderful. What do you like about it?
It's really educational, actually. As an expat living here, it allows me to get into some areas of, especially the documentaries, where you learn a lot in depth about issues in Ireland, current issues. And then as well, I think it's a burgeoning industry in Ireland now with the film industry, the growing level of speaking Irish. It's just an abundance of things to learn about in Ireland right now, I think.
Brilliant. And what was your favourite film this year?
Yeah, so my favourite movie was Let the Land Speak by Mangan. And what I really liked about that was his ideas about interconnectedness with nature, with one another, and especially with our past and how we can reconnect with that.
Thank you so much for listening. So make sure to like and subscribe to Film Ireland wherever you get your podcasts.